Hi, everyone, and welcome to the eDiscovery for Microsoft Teams session. I am Erica Telly, your presenter today. I'll be monitoring the live event Q&A. Please ask your questions as we go through. I'm going to do a little check after every session to answer any questions that you have. So yeah, you're in the Manage eDiscovery for Microsoft Teams session. So a little background about this topic. So I specialize in eDiscovery and help customers either learn to deploy it or help the IT teams convince the legal teams that it's okay to deploy Teams because they'll be able to discover the data. So this session is kind of the presentation that I would give to a legal team to explain to them how Microsoft Teams works with eDiscovery, basically to assure them that they don't need to block a deployment of Teams or have any concerns about it. So just a little background on that perspective. So there's typically 5 topics that I would cover in a demo like this. So first, just a little background about eDiscovery in Microsoft 365 and how that works. Second, I will go through how to place a hold on Microsoft Teams content. Then how to search for Microsoft Teams content. And then if you do have one of the more advanced or expensive licenses, the E5 or equivalent, you can actually review the Teams data inside Office 365 before it's exported, just to kind of cull down or reduce the size of that export and make sure it's only including relevant data. And then finally, of course, we'll go through how to actually export the Teams data. So a little level set about eDiscovery in Microsoft or Office 365. So first, it covers all the basics that you would expect in an eDiscovery tool, or that your legal team would expect in eDiscovery tool. Number 1, you can place content on hold, meaning that it cannot be edited or modified or deleted. It allows you to search for data across many areas in Office 365. I have a slide that'll cover what ones you can't search. And then finally, you can export it out of Microsoft 365. So a little context on positioning. So there's a lot of eDiscovery tools out there that are really purpose-built for the lawyers or for litigation teams. The eDiscovery tool in Microsoft 365 is only meant to search for Microsoft 365 data, review that data if you have the advanced tools, and then export it out. Usually, most organizations that are in the US responding to litigation would then import it into another purpose-built eDiscovery tool where they're gathering all the data from all the systems in their organization. So that would be something like Relativity, or there's a bunch of other systems as well. So it's important sometimes to make sure that your legal team understands that, so they don't think that this is meant to replace what they already have. It's meant to augment it and make their workflow easier for content in Office 365. Another thing I want to point out is these tools aren't just for litigation. Especially if you're outside the US where people aren't suing each other all the time. You can also use this tool set to respond to data subject requests from customers, which is a very complex query to find all their data in Office 365, and then you want to review it so you're not telling them about things they should know about. You could also use it for something like an internal investigation. So I had a customer recently that someone was kind of bullying someone or making fun of them on a Teams chat that they accidentally saw when they shared the screen in a meeting. This would be great to do that type of an investigation to see if that happened or not. And then there's also content search, which is basically eDiscovery without the hold functionality. And then all of these technologies are using the same basic search functionality. So the kind of search that you would do in content search, in the content search solution, is the same as the search you're going to do in advanced eDiscovery. So once you learn how to do a search in the Compliance Center, you can use that knowledge across all these solutions. Because everything's basically eDiscovery with maybe some name changes in the user interface. So when you are doing eDiscovery, it is important to have a basic understanding of where your team's content is located, because that's going to affect how you write your search queries and the things that you put on hold. For example, there's usually two types of hold requests that I see. The first one would be you want to put an individual on hold. The second one is that you want to put something like a project on hold. So if you want to put an individual on hold, you want to, first of all, put their user mailbox on a hold, of course. And then that's going to include any thing in the team's chat area. So they're one-to-one or group chats that don't occur in a Teams channel. Now, depending on what your legal team tells you, they're usually the ones that make these types of decisions. You may need to put any Teams channels that they're a member of on hold as well. So that's a separate search and a separate step. And we'll go through how to do that, of course. And then, as you probably know, any type of file data is stored for the team in SharePoint. So you would need to put the SharePoint site on hold if you want to put the files on hold. And then, just as an aside, you can put Teams private channels on a legal hold, but because the messages are stored in the individual's mailbox, you need to actually put their mailboxes on hold to cover that data. And then any content would be in the separate SharePoint site collection. So usually you put stuff on hold for a few reasons. So first, the official kind of legal definition for litigation purposes is once you have a reasonable expectation that litigation is going to happen. So it isn't necessarily when you're served the notice, but it's when you kind of know it's going to happen. Again, I'm pretty sure most of the people on this call work in IT. Your legal team should be giving you those types of notices, and there should be some type of a process for that. They notify you, and then based on the criteria that they give you, you go and you perform the search and hold actions I'm about to show you. A couple other notes, you can't put individual channels of a team on hold. You can only put the whole team on a legal hold. And it will include private channels when you put that team on hold. Or no, I'm sorry. If you want to put the private channel on hold, you also have to put the individuals in the channel on hold. And then it will preserve all messages, including if somebody goes back and edits a message, it'll keep all those versions, or if someone deletes a message. If it's the team's already on legal hold, it'll keep that information. So actually, let's go ahead really quick and show a demo. So a couple things. So first, here I am in the Microsoft Compliance Center. So this is a admin center for compliance, similar to the Exchange Admin Center or the SharePoint Admin Center. So you can give people permissions just to this area, and then you can give them role-based permissions just for these solutions. So our solutions are listed here on the left-hand side. You can see content search. You can see the core and advanced eDiscovery. And then the data investigations and the data subject requests are also solutions that are technically eDiscovery. So those are all kind of in the same family that Microsoft calls the Discover and Respond solutions. So I'm going to show you how to put things on hold in advanced eDiscovery because it's really more realistic for a team situation. So here I'm in advanced eDiscovery. Things take a while to run, so I already have a case set up in this environment. And I'm going to go to my Sources tab. The Sources tab is where I can either put individuals on hold or data locations on hold. like for the example of if it's a project that's going through litigation. You might want to have some additional data locations on hold that aren't related to an individual. If I go ahead and add a custodian, I'm going to either search for their name, or I can upload a bulk CSV file with all this information to do this at scale. And so I can see here it's found the person's Exchange mailbox and their OneDrive. That's fine. But here I have additional locations. So if I was doing this in core eDiscovery, and the solution that's included in E3, I'd have to run a PowerShell script to find what teams Nestor is a member of. But if you use the advanced eDiscovery tool and you click choose teams, it's going to give you a filtered list of the teams where Nestor is either an owner or a member. So you can just go ahead and choose that, and then now you've included those teams locations where he's been collaborating, as well as his personal information in his mailbox. Of course, you can do the same for Yammer, but that's not what we're covering in this presentation. So now I can go ahead and put him on hold, or if you just want to kind of scope that location, you can put them in here and not put them on hold. But if you go ahead and click complete, when I hit complete, what it's going to do is it's going to kick off what's called a job. So a lot of these processes are long-running processes, meaning they can take anywhere from 15 minutes to hours or even days if you're using a lot of like terabytes of data. So it kicks off a job to keep track of that process, and so you can check on it. It's going to take a second just for this to load. Oh, there we go. So now we can see he's on hold. And if I go over here to the Jobs tab, I can track the status of long-running processes. And you can see here, it's re-indexing the custodian data. So what it's doing when it's indexing that custodian data is it's doing a deeper index. So there's always these things called partially indexed items in your search index in Office 365. These could be anything from password protected files to really large files to images. There's a list. So it's trying to reprocess that data and get rid of any unindexed or partially indexed items. Now, the other thing I could do is put a data location on hold. So if I was to do that, you can see here, I would need to either choose the Exchange mailbox I want to put on hold, which would be the Teams chats and conversations for either an individual or group mailbox. Oops. So I can search for that information and put it on hold separately from an individual. So here you can see those group mailboxes. Or you can choose SharePoint or OneDrive sites. All right. So that's a quick overview of holds. Usually, now the legal team is assured that yes, they can put stuff on hold and that it is preserved. You may need to run a little proof of concept to prove that is true, but that's totally fine. Okay, so now let's talk about searching for Teams data. Now, there's two different ways that your legal team might want you to search. One is to do a very, very broad search where they would rather catch too much information than risk getting too little information. So in that case, they might want you to just search and bring back the results of someone's entire mailbox, or a group, all the contents of a group mailbox, which would include the Teams chats. Or they might want you to get more specific. So in the case of that internal investigation I mentioned where someone was being bullied in chat, we wanted to get as specific as possible so we didn't have to manually review a bunch of content. So to do that, there's really two types of search queries that you can do, or search properties that you can use. One would be typing into the keyword area kind:\Microsoft Teams. And that's going to return everything from chats meetings, and then calls, which are if you're in the chat and you call somebody. But in this case, we knew that it didn't happen in a meeting or a call. We could tell it was a one-on-one chat. So in that case, we use the search condition item class ipm.skypeteams.message, because that brings back items from only chats and conversations. So only the Teams messages. If you wanted to get even more specific, you could use the participants property, where you can put in somebody's email, and if they either sent or received a message, it'll return the results. And then, of course, you can do things like date ranges to even get more specific. If you want to search for files, easily people either want to do that by location, which you can use the site property, or they want to find like all OneNote files or something in a certain location, so you can narrow it down further. If you're really going to get into searching, look at this article. I've made these slides available, but it goes to the help documentation that shows you keyword queries on search conditions, and it'll tell you all the different things you can use in a search, and even some example queries. So I highly recommend that you take a look at that. Oh, okay. Well, it's better to have it full screen anyway. I was actually trying to figure out how to do that. This is my first time producing a session. Okay, so then the other thing that your legal team is going to ask you is what data is discoverable? So in that case, this is a list of all the different types of Teams data, and if it's eDiscoverable, meaning it'll show up in a chat or in an eDiscovery search. So you can see that there's, most things you can find. The exceptions are when you do an eDiscovery search, you actually cannot filter or see a metadata property that is the name of the channel, unfortunately. Common request. You also won't be able to return code snippets in a search. You won't be able to see any reactions to a message. That's another common request, because people want to see, it can a thumbs up or a heart can be seen as an okay or a sign of acknowledgement, and that might be relevant to your case. And then right now, meeting recordings are not discoverable. However, at Ignite, they announced that they're going to start storing meeting recordings in OneDrive and SharePoint, in which case it's just another file, and now we'll be able to retain and put on hold and search for these meeting recordings. Depending on if you're a first release customer or in the regular ring, that'll come out sometime in October or November of this year. And then whiteboard data is stored in an Azure service, so it is not discoverable. Just a reminder that I am monitoring the Q&A, so please feel free to put your questions in there and I'll get those answered. All right, so now let's jump over to the demo. So I'm actually going to start in content search because I think it's a little easier to see what's going on. So content search, I can't do holds, but I can search for information and export it. So here I just have my simple search query where I've put in the item class that we saw will bring back only the Teams messages. And then I'm looking at specific locations, and I'm only going to search the Exchange locations because I just want those Teams messages and no files. If I wanted to, I could add other conditions. Of course, the date is a common one, but you can see there's lots of options here. And then, of course, if we go to our help article that I showed you earlier, there's even more options that you can put into the keyword box, just as I did here. Now, it takes maybe like 3 to 5 minutes for this to run. So I already clicked save and run, and then it's showing me my results here. And as you can see, each individual message is actually stored technically as a Exchange mailbox item. So each message is a different Teams message. So it's important to note that these are stored in the mailboxes for compliance purposes only. The Teams messages still do exist in the chat substrate. So if you want to delete everything, make sure you're using retention policies to do that. Now, you might say that it'd be really difficult to review messages or take a look at them one by one, and you'd be right. So if you use the advanced eDiscovery tool, actually, let me show you search first. So here I've done a search for Teams data. And what I did is I chose, all the custodians and data locations I had set up when I put things on hold in the previous step that we went through. And then I added additional locations. So this is a demo tenant. It doesn't have a lot of data in it. So I just went ahead and selected everything. In a real life situation, you want to get more specific and choose specific mailboxes to search because otherwise it's just going to be too much data and it'll take way too long. But for the search criteria, in this case, I used the kind is Microsoft Teams so that I could return meeting information and everything like that. And you can see if I add a condition, these are the same exact ones that you just saw in core eDiscovery, or sorry, in content search. And they're the same ones you would see in core eDiscovery as well. So then I just ran that search. And it took a while to run, but it was successful. And then what I did is I added my results to a review set. So this is something you can only do in advanced eDiscovery, but it allows you to review the data before you export it. This is useful because large exports take a long time. So the smaller they are, the better. And it can also be useful if you're responding to something like a DSR request, a data subject request, and you want to make sure that you're only telling them about the data you want them to see. So if I did this, what I did is I created a conversation review set. And what this does is it reconstructs the Teams conversations into threads so that I can review them all in context of each other as a group, which reduces the volume that I need to look at. And then it also makes it easier to make a proper review because I can see the context of the whole conversation. So you can see I can choose Teams conversations. And then if somebody shared a link to a file that's in SharePoint or OneDrive, I can also bring back those files in the messages for review as well, which is something the lawyers are going to ask you about. So yes, you can do that. So what I did is I did these settings here. I called it a Teams review set. This one took a while to run. On 1 gig of data, it takes about an hour. But what you're left with now is this review set. So here I can see all the messages that were returned, or all the items that were returned by my search query, including things like the modern attachments. And what I can do is set up my custom tags here. And in this case, I wanted to say, is this relevant, yes or no? And then what I can do is only export the relevant items and not the ones I marked as no. You can see here that if you look at a file, you can see, oh, that's not a good one to choose. You can see the full image of the information. There we go. So I can look at the spreadsheet in full fidelity. I can also just look at it in text view, which is something that reviewers do a lot because this allows them to really just get to the information they need. And then if you're doing something like a DSR or even in legal cases, you are able to redact files as needed. So if you don't want someone to see something, that's how you handle it. Also, sometimes when I'm trying to refine my search to really get at what I'm only want to see, I'll look at some of this file metadata. And, you can see things like, for example, the title of the file, that it's part of, it's here because Adele was put on hold. I can see that it's stored in a SharePoint site, that the last person that authored it was Megan. Here's where it's located. And so I'll use this to kind of find clues about other information I might want to conclude in my search. So that's another thing that the lawyers usually really like, because you never get your search query perfect the first time. You usually have to go back and refine it. And then the other thing you can do is search within this review set. So what I did is I searched for the item class. And then what you can see is it's bringing back only the team's messages. So if I click on one of these messages, you can see it's reconstructed that conversation. And that not only that, but it brought the modern attachment over, and I can go into that if I wanted to. And then you could download the individual message or view the details of the metadata, just like any other file. But lawyers love this, so make sure you show that in your demo. So then I would just mark it as relevant or not relevant and move on with my day. You can also, of course, filter on the fly with these review sets if you don't want to do a permanent search. And then I will just mention really quick, you know, if I am, if I'm only looking at all the items, you can see here there's 9,637 items. In advanced eDiscovery, it'll create this set called for review, and this removes all the duplicates. So you can see it got it down to 5759 instead. And then what I do is I create a search called only relevant documents. So this is only things where I tagged it as yes for relevancy. And then that's what I'm going to export. So I'm going to select all of them and then export it. I'm jumping ahead to the next section a little bit, but we're here, so why not? So you can name your export, and I'm going to do only the selected documents. This here of metadata is if you're going to import it into another eDiscovery system, like I mentioned, that a lot of people do. You can preserve any tags you added to it through this tool. The load files the information it needs to get the files into the other system how you want it to be. You can do the native files, and then you can keep them as conversations, which honestly most people do, or you could export them as those individual chat messages that we saw in content search. And then here's the options for how to export that. I'm going to go to my export slide really quick, and then we'll show you the same thing in core eDiscovery and content search. So what I just showed you was the advanced eDiscovery options. So in core eDiscovery, you can either export just a report, which a lot of times when you're doing a data subject request, they just want to have a manifest or a list of the data that you have on them. So you just export this report and not all the items themselves. It's a nice spreadsheet that gives you all the information about what you have on the person. It can also be a great way to kind of sanity check with your lawyers that you got all the right information they were expecting without having to wait to export every file. And then you can also export the all the files. So there's different options here for whether you want to export items that were unrecognized, or what I mentioned earlier, the partially indexed or unindexed items. If you need to troubleshoot those, by the way, you can choose this option just to look at the files that can't be indexed. And then you can decide if you want, remember Teams messages or Exchange content. In core eDiscovery, it's not going to thread them for you. That's only available in advanced eDiscovery. So you can choose how you want to break up those PST files. And honestly, your legal team is going to have a preference, so just do whatever they want. Oh, sorry, wrong button, my bad. So let's go ahead and look at how that works. So I'm going to go actually back to core search, content search. If I wanted to, I would just go to more, and I can either export the report or the results. You can see it's the same information that was in the screenshot. There we go. This deduplication button will basically remove, well, basically the duplicate emails. So for example, when someone sends a chat one-on-one message, it's going to be a copy of that's going to be kept in the mailbox of everybody who received that message as well as who sent it. So if you want to deduplicate that, so you only have one copy of the message, you can do that. So what I did is I have some exports set up here. So for example, I did this all teams data search. I did an example of all the data and then report only. And then what I did is you can see it went to my downloads folder here. You can see all teams data. If I open it, these are all of this is all the information that's included. So for example, the summary report is that report I was talking about. It's going to give you, well, a summary. So you can see, actually down to the file level information about what's being exported. And then, of course, it's going to give you the actual files. So I chose give me a PST file for each person. So you can see, if it's a group mailbox, that's one PST file. And then if it's a person, it's another. And then what you would do is you can actually, most people just open it in Outlook to look at the results. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like. So here I just imported the sales and marketing folder by going to open Outlook data file. And here you can see the conversation history. There's a team chat area. Now the end user wouldn't see this at all. This is just because I, as the admin, exported and then imported their information. But you can see, I can view the contents of a file. If it was a thread, it put it together. And yeah, that's what it looks like. Honestly, I was hoping to show you an advanced eDiscovery export, but I'm on a beta build, and the exports just aren't working today, unfortunately, or well, the last 2 days. So sorry about that. But normally there would be files that are the reconstructed conversations, so it would look just like it did in the review set. Okay. So we're almost at the end of the presentation here, and I wanted to make sure that we left some time for questions, because I don't believe for a second that I explained this so well that there's not a single question. So please, go ahead and put that in the live event Q&A, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. All right. Well, if you would like to provide some feedback for the event or for this session, I'm always looking to improve, so I would appreciate any feedback that you have about how to make this presentation better. And then, of course, always thank you to our sponsors who make this conference possible. And I forgot to put in my contact details. I am just my first name, last name, everywhere on social media. As you go through this, please don't hesitate to contact me on LinkedIn or Twitter with any questions, I'm always happy to help. eDiscovery is an extremely complex topic, and it's not you, it's complex. So just ask questions. So with that, I'll just stay on the line for a couple minutes to see if there's any other questions, but otherwise, please enjoy the rest of your day.